Welcome to Even Tacos Fall Apart, a podcast with real stories, real struggles, and real hope. I'm MommaFoxFire, and I am so glad you're here today. We are talking about rebuilding your life with clarity and purpose. Not many folks talk about how disorienting rebuilding your life actually is. You get to see the highlight reel. Someone goes through something awful, and then a year or two later, they're standing there looking calm and grounded and purposeful, and we think, okay, great, so there's a path. But what we don't see is all the days in between where they had absolutely no idea what they were doing. The days where they second-guessed every decision. The days where they felt like a completely different person living in the wreckage of a life that used to make sense and just doesn't right now. Rebuilding is not clean. It's not a straight line. You don't just decide to have clarity and then wake up with it the next morning. For a lot of folks, clarity only comes after a serious amount of pain forces you to stop and actually look at your life honestly, probably for the first time in a really long time. And that is hard as hell. And purpose is one of those words that gets thrown around so much it almost loses meaning. Find your purpose, live your purpose. But what does that actually look like when you're exhausted and scared, and when the thing you built your entire identity around has been taken away from you, or you walked away from it, and now you're standing there going, oh shit, now what? Who am I if I'm not that person anymore? Those are real questions, and I don't think enough people are honest about how scary it is not to have the answers. What I found talking to people who have come out the other side of something that actually broke them is the rebuilding doesn't start with a big dramatic moment of inspiration. It starts with something a lot smaller, a lot quieter. It starts with being willing to be honest about where you actually are. Not where you want to be, not where you think you should be, just where you are right now. That is the starting point for most people. Today's guest is James Brett. James spent years at the top of a high-pressure corporate career, leading sales teams across Australia, Singapore, and Europe, winning multi-million-dollar contracts, collecting all the external markers of success. And underneath all of that, he was burning out. He wasn't listening to his body. He was running so hard he didn't have time to notice the cracks, or maybe he just didn't want to. Then he got a stage 3 kidney cancer diagnosis. He had his kidney removed. He nearly died from complications in the week after surgery. And what came out of all of that is someone who has done the work, not the Instagram version of healing, but the real, actual work. The messy, non-linear, sometimes, maybe more than sometimes, confusing version where you're using a pendulum to figure out what your body needs and crying in a field because an eagle flew over you and something in you just cracked open in a good way. James now coaches people from all over the world and runs a retreat space in Australia. And the way he talks about the mind and how we actually create our experience of life genuinely stopped me in my tracks a few times during this conversation. I hope it'll do the same for you. So if you're in the middle of something right now, if you're rebuilding or trying to figure out who you are on the other side of something that changed everything for you, or maybe you've just had that low hum in the background for a while that's telling you something has to change, but you don't know what or how, this interview is for you. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday here on Even Tacos Fall Apart. I'm really excited to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time out of the start of your week to join us here. As always, we are live and we have a question queue open for our guest tonight. We are talking to James Brett, and we are going to be talking about rebuilding life with clarity and purpose. So if you have any questions related to that while we are here, while we are live, feel free to pop them into the chat either on Twitch or on YouTube, and we'll make sure to get them answered while we are here. And like I said, today's guest is James Brett. He has lived a pretty extraordinary life, from leading teams and winning multi-million-dollar contracts across Australia, Singapore, and Europe, to facing stage 3 cancer and coming out the other side with more clarity and purpose than ever. James has trained with some of the world's leading coaches, drawn wisdom from ancient Eastern practices, and today he helps people find strength in their most messy, difficult moments through coaching and retreats. So, James, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So, if you are looking to connect with James, I have a few links for you here, a link to his website, a link to Facebook, a link to LinkedIn as well. Make sure you pop over to those and like a couple of posts, give him a follow, make sure that you are doing all the engagement things, leave a comment, all those sorts of things that help that algorithm get fed. And while everyone is looking into connecting with you, James, I would love to know what inspired you to start sharing your story.
Well, yeah, it's a great. I was reflecting in terms of that. There's just been this longing to come back into service. 15 months ago, I went through my big dark night of the soul. So you mentioned that stage 3 cancer, had my right kidney removed as part of that. So a 10 centimeter tumor. And I've been in recovery and rebuilding and then coming back into my vitality and balance, harmonizing both the mind and the body. And through there then is that wish, that drive to come back into service to others, to support others, to find balance, to be the best they can, and to see the possibility in others. And that's brought me into, yeah, sharing my story. We've been building a boutique retreat space on the mid-north coast of Australia where we run workshops and retreats here. And so that's also making people aware of that and also working with people online and just support that, yeah, drive to be of service and to support others in their own growth and balance.
Do you help people from all over the world? Do you mostly stick to Australia, or is it just you've helped, from here to there and everywhere in between?
Yeah, so I work with people online, and so I'm working with clients at the moment back in the UK and where I'm originally from. Also over in Singapore as well at the moment. So yeah, it's we have a local presence where we can do in-person retreats and work here on our lands, and then do things online in terms of then to be able to support the more broader community.
Yeah, I love that. It's always neat to be able to connect with people. Like you're in Australia, I'm in Texas in the US. Like it's really truly a world apart. And so it's always neat to be able to connect with different people. And then I would imagine taking something like your story of survival and how you've been able to rebuild and how you've been able to find that purpose. I mean, that's universally inspiring, right? That's not just, oh, my neighbor's going to be inspired by it. It's like, no, it doesn't matter where you live. Somebody could pick up on this and be really, really motivated by it. I love that. I'm glad that you started to share your story for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you have a movie that you feel more folks should take the time to watch, or a favorite movie?
Yeah, this was actually just thinking about, I have so many that have really touched me, but one to mention, I love Christopher Nolan's work and his movie. There's a number of his movies where he plays with time and plays with the mind, but
Mm.
Inception,
Oh,
that movie which plays with the nature of reality, of dreams within dreams. And so that's aligned with my own sort of journey exploring the nature of reality, the nature of mind, of consciousness. And so I love that that's expressed through movies. In that movie, it puts you into wondering and curious around the power of the mind and what happens when we have a seed of a belief that's planted and how that can grow, and then how we believe a reality is true and what is true. So it's that's why I recommend that movie to, yeah, spark that bit of curiosity.
yeah. I also recommend that movie, but I recommend you watch it at least twice. There aren't a lot of movies that I'm like, watch it, wait a day and watch it again. But that's definitely one because you're gonna watch it and then you're gonna. There's another movie that's similar in that like you're not gonna pick up everything the first time you watch it through. Oh, it's the Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like I don't think you can pick up everything in that movie just on one watch through. But then once you see it again, you're like, okay, I thought about this a little bit. And Inception is definitely one of those. It's one of those You got to watch it more than once because the second time, the third time you watch it, you're going to pick up more and more of it and go, okay, something just clicked into place for me.
Yes, and it's so powerful when we see something, we can create some space to contemplate and allow then for some deeper insights to bubble up, and that takes us beyond the intellect, the mind that's trying to get everything, but will the way the mind works will also only, as you say, will only capture a little bit of it. It's filtered through our minds, so we then may need to go back and rewatch it again or reread what we're looking at, right? If it's a book, and
Mhm.
then yeah, we get some deeper meaning, some deeper understanding, a deeper insight.
Yeah. You brought up books, and I recently read through a series that I had read. I've read it multiple times. This was probably my second full read through of every book in the series, but probably my fifth or sixth read through because every time a new book would come out, I would start back over and read all the way through it. But it's Terry Goodkind's Sword of Truth series. And I tell people now that I've read it again, I'm like, only read up to book 7 and then stop. Like, don't read the rest. The rest is not as good as I used to really think that it was. And it's like, just read up to this point because it's fantastic. But even rereading it this time, I'm going, wow, my world views have changed a lot well, even just since I last read that book. So sometimes, just kind of going through and being like, oh, yeah, this has a totally different meaning. And I understand this part, or now I disagree with this part of this book or the show or whatever. But yeah, I'm if you have something that you love, definitely watch it or read it or listen to it more than once and in multiple moods too.
So true. Yeah, because we don't realize we're changing and shifting
Hmm.
and growing, and so that we see things from that different perspective then when we revisit it too.
Yep. Now, before cancer, you were at the top of your game professionally. What did life look like and feel like back then? Were you happy? Or were there cracks that you weren't looking for that were definitely there? Kind of like that hindsight is 2020, or what was that like for you?
Yeah, so in looking back and in hindsight, I was really pushing for a lot of my life. I was
Mm,
working in very high level, high stake sales, leading sales teams, working across, yeah, whole country in terms of on big software sales procurements, and that was my life, very driven, but I also was pushing so hard. And when I look back, there was a disconnect in a way from being
mm,
able to really listen to what was going on in my body and how hard I was pushing and not listening when I really needed to rest more. So there was that reflection. And through that, yeah, I've always had a fascination, as I said, about understanding the mind and what is happiness? Where is happiness? Is that in the things, and is that in the outside world? Is that in my relationships? Is that in the things that I have? Where is that? And so that journey's been happening for, yeah, my life, but particularly the last 15 years when I was in Australia, I was starting to go deeper into what I call the inner work, inner mastery of the mind, and looking at, well, why am I? Some days do I wake up in a funk, and other days I feel like I'm in top of the world. And so I was exploring that in terms of that, well, also being caught up in this high stakes corporate environment and
mhm,
selling and pushing. There was also an aspect of, when I look back, not being fully authentic, that I was like a chameleon needing to fit into the corporate culture, the way you needed to look, the way you needed to speak, the way you needed to show up. It's true in connecting with someone when you're, for example, talking about, yeah, the nature of consciousness, the nature of our minds, how do we create our reality? Who am I? And so, of course, I would have almost like a double life, be exploring some of those things, those deeper questions outside of that corporate world. And at the same time, was in the corporate world, was caught up really running very fast, chasing success. And that had a price to it in terms of the burnout, which was part of that coming into that deep experience and dark night of the soul with cancer.
yeah. And did it really take cancer to kind of pull you out of it all the way, or were you already kind of on that path of I've got to change something.
Well, yes, and it happened during that was
Mm.
also a big gift to me because I was literally flying every week around Asia Pacific, and I was sort of spent a lot of time in airports, a lot of time in hotels. That impacts your ability to have a really I thrive on having a regular routine and sort of being able to have a morning practice and a way of yeah, just balancing myself. I'm very sensitive to other people's energies, so having time in my own energy. So all of that traveling was also part of that burnout, this travel. And so when COVID hit and we got lockdowns, as we all remember, many of us, I was locked down in Sydney, and it was a real gift that I wasn't then able to do all of that travel. I was just staying at home. I was working primarily in education in schools, and they'd closed all the schools. And so I was still being paid, but I had this deep time then to start to do more deeper meditation, more inner practices to look at how to be in peace even with all of the chaos. So that was the start of that journey. And then I did resign from this corporate job where I'd had massive success with some of those multi-million-dollar contract wins and winning salesperson of the year and being sent to Africa on a safari. So all of these, amazing experiences. But underneath that, I was getting burned out. So I sort of, after COVID, COVID things settled down, I said, I don't want to go back to that life. I don't want to be going back to flying all of the time. And so left that. And then I fell in love with my partner, a beautiful woman, a goddess who also was itchy, and we bought a van and went traveling up and down the coast of Australia to look at where could we settle. We had this dream of buying some land and then building a retreat space somewhere where we could offer a place of transformation and healing. Little did I know I was going to need some deeper healing myself. And we found this place just under 3 years ago, but had come from the city living in an apartment, and suddenly we were on 2.5 acres of land. And in Australia, we get good rain, we get lots of sun, everything grows like crazy. And so I went from sort of that corporate sort of experience of sort of running really fast to being on land and being overwhelmed with all of the maintenance and management and us looking to build structures so we could gather and support community. But I'd sort of swapped one level of overwhelm for another in
Yeah.
terms of burnout in there. And so that took me into, yeah, the body. And as I see it and our experience, we grow through our suffering. Those who suffer the most amount of suffering seem to be the most capable of
Mm.
waking up to our true nature, the essential nature of ourselves, knowing that, the peace and happiness we're seeking outside is actually inside of us. That's the nature of us before it's obscured by thinking and identity and the mind. That veils it, so we look first of all outside, and that was the path I'd spent my life sort of looking outside. And then that health challenge but firstly was, it brought me to my knees, and like, here's an existential threat. You're gonna potentially die here. And in that slowing down, there was then the recalibration from that to doing things in alignment with nature rather
Mm.
than letting the mind sort of force the pace and pushing. Yeah.
Yeah. I First of all, I love that you call your partner itchy, and that it was just one of those things that, like, y'all both had to scratch that itch and go find a way to do it. I think that's a great description. But also, like, I really hate the fact that it takes a lot of suffering sometimes. For some people, it takes a lot of suffering to really open their eyes and really help them understand what they're capable of, what their purpose is, like all of these things. And I know that there's a lot of folks out there who have been through I've spoken to so many people who have been through major life-changing suffering of one sort or another. And it's like I came out the other side with this clarity of mind and with this deeper understanding. And I just wish it didn't take all that suffering. I wish it didn't. I hope that, you tell your kids like learn from my mistakes or do as I say and not as I do. I wish that was easier.
The beauty of being human is we have these dualities, these
Yeah.
polarities in our experience to navigate. And how do we meet those? How do we into those? How do we be grateful for the highs and graceful with the lows?
Yeah. So you found this place, you're working this place, you've already got this kind of goal in your mind of being community centered and really kind of turning your life to this direction instead of what you had been. And then you got your cancer diagnosis. What was your first honest reaction when you got that diagnosis?
So it was, yeah, complete shock,
Yeah.
fear in terms of
Mm.
why me? Because there was still, even though I had, also as you shared, I was pushing. There was still, I was looking after myself in terms of, I wouldn't be drinking much alcohol, was still maintaining, a pretty healthy diet. So it was, and doing, a lot of inner work, exploring lots of different aspects of consciousness, of states of consciousness, of how we could shift our states of consciousness. So, but that was the initial. It was, how can this happen to me? The fear,
Mm.
that yeah, gut wrenching fear of dying when we're just starting this new journey with my beloved Lisa to create a space, and then this happened, and it, yeah, brought us both to our knees. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, I that's a big diagnosis. And then you're immediately looking at, okay, what are my next steps? What are even my options? And it just brings up so many questions. But now you describe your cancer as the biggest gift. I think a lot of people might hear that and think, really? So can you walk us through how you got from that initial holy shit reaction to this? Actually, this was a huge gift for me. How'd you get there?
Yeah, 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 for sure. And I see that. I see that deeper truth in every shadow there is a gift. In the deepest challenge, there's the deepest growth that
Mm.
comes from that edge we have. And so for me, there was that initial, as I said, that reaction, that coming into fear, the mind getting really busy, the noise. I already though had an understanding, I had a realization around that below all of that thinking, if I fall back out of that after that noise, there's this deeper peace, there's this calm, the spaciousness that we are, in which that noise, the thinking, our experience arises. So that, and there's still moments where, of course, life is so intense and someone's emotional wave or the experience, you get lost in it. But I was already through the deeper pathways, the three deeper pathways of meditation, of contemplation and inquiry. Those three pathways, inwards, inner pathways, bring you back to your deeper essence, and that peace and stillness that we are, and that knowing when we see that, and then we start to taste it and recognize there's an intelligence, what I saw in the mind, there's a design for success where when we know how something works, and we know that that's our deeper nature, that we experience life from the inside out, even though it can feel like it's happening to us from outside in. I'm the victim to the world, and I see the world like a camera. Actually, that's a misunderstanding. It's always inside of us, and our experience is being shaped by thought. And so that recognition in itself, the mind quietens without having to do intervention, without trying to stop thought or change thinking. It becomes quieter, and there's room then for fresh thinking, for fresh insight, a change of perspective, to see the cancer was a reset, a slowing down, that I had to slow down then and reharmonize both the mind and the body, and that disconnect of just being in the mind. And that was that turning point then of then listening even more deeply to the body, the mind quietening as the body softens as well, the tension. And then in that softening, in that harmonization, the healing has happened. As I'm cancer free, my left kidney is stronger, it's taking the load. And so that's been that my own journey of softening, of coming into harmony with both the mind and the body, and that inner work, as well as still some that outer practices, which I love. I do a lot of qigong and Eastern practices, which again around energy, regulating energy,
Mm.
which I explored through the cancer journey as well, in terms of how I can support the body, listen to the body and what it needs, to help it heal. And that intelligence of the body will do the healing. Yeah.
That was gonna be one of my questions is, how did you get like, what things helped you get from point A to point B too? I mean, if you're exploring kind of these Eastern practices, was there anything in particular? You mentioned Qigong, but is there anything in particular that you studied or read or, you listened to somebody talk or anything like that that really helped you get there?
Yeah, so and so many things in terms of that. So
Yeah.
there's been that deep passion, fascination about understanding the mind and looking at neuroscience and understanding how we create our reality. So there was that aspect. There was then the energy practices. So even from when I came out of hospital after the surgery, and they'd given me some strong opiates, endone, to support with the pain. I was cut right down the middle, and so
Mm.
they could get to the cancer and the kidney. And when I came out, I was sort of firstly really knocked sideways by the opiates. So I wasn't thinking clearly, and they gave me such great care in the public health system, but where there was an issue is I didn't get most great post care in terms of nutritional recommendations. And
Mm.
so I was on these sort of tailing off these opiates, and then was like, they were saying, well, and they got my sort of nutrition, my sort of follow post diets, post surgery food wrong, and were giving me sort of rice and other stuff that was just blocking me up. And because they took all of my intestines out, they're almost like 10 meters long.
Yeah.
They then put them all back in. And of course, it's highly likely they could get twisted and you could get a bowel obstruction. And so that happened to me. I had this bowel obstruction a week or so after surgery,
Wow.
and couldn't eat or drink for days. I lost 11 kilos, and that's when I almost died. And I'd been to see a kinesiologist who can sort of read energy muscle test, and was sort of saying your body does not want opiates. It doesn't want those. So put me on some natural pain relief. Sent me to actually a THC dispensary to that we have a few of those. The laws are changing here in Australia as well, like they have softened in the US. And that was part of that. Then of I then got introduced to actually. It sounds quite woo. We're using a pendulum, just using a pendulum to ask them what my body needed. So
Mm.
I would sort of say, "What? Tell me a yes, tell me a no, or don't know." With just using you can just have a piece of chain or a string with an object on the bottom. Normally, it has a point as a pendulum, and I would use that to muscle test and ask. And also initially go to see a kinesiologist who's trained to sort of listen to the body and what
Yeah.
the body wants, and then adjusted what I was putting into my body to what my body was asking for, the intelligence of the body, rather than it just going through my mind that I think, oh, this is a good cancer treatment. I've read this somewhere. I better start putting that into my body. So that tuning and listening was one of the big shifts in terms of that changing what protocols, So one of the things my body's been asking for ever since that surgery is frankincense. So it's not recognized by the FDA or anything as a cancer treatment. It's not seen as something that can support. But there are some studies, not the ones that big pharma have been sponsoring and supporting, that point to that being supportive. And my body's have been asking for that. And then the other aspect was the kidneys and the ears are connected in Chinese medicine. And for like a month after the surgery and that bowel obstruction, when I was in healing, I would go to bend over and I would just fall over, and I would lose my balance. I'm like, what's going on? And my doctor didn't know what was happening. Says, well, your blood pressure's fine. I'm not sure what's happening. And it was my partner, Lisa. She saw in the local town, Bellingen, a beautiful conscious town, lots of conscious sort of practices and facilitators and teachers. And they run each year something called Camp Creative, where they share different practices and for children and adults. And there was someone doing a Qigong 5-day workshop. And I'd actually been doing that before COVID, I was loving it. And then I sort of fell out of that and started choosing to do some other practices. I met my partner. She's a Kundalini yoga, Himalayan yoga teacher, and got into doing that and forgot about the Qigong, forgot about the Qigong and Neigong practices. And I did this 5 days, this 5-day workshop. And I was like, I could feel my body was like, it really, really loves this. It wants it. And so I went to look at the Chinese master that I'd started doing some work with back in 2018, and he was running a retreat, a 10-day retreat in Queensland, just 4 hours north of where we are. And he had in the write-up to his sort of 10 days, if you've had an organ removed or you're recovering from cancer, you should come and do this retreat. I was like, who writes that in a write-up to a retreat? And I went, and then I did 10 days of this beautiful, beautiful, a moving meditation, a softening of the body, of the mind, and moving to breath. And within a week of doing that 10 days, my balance had come back. And so I was like, okay. So then I've taken, and then you follow, you listen. So I went last year and spent some time in China working with this Taoist master and deepening, and then have been deepening that practice and Qigong, that energy practice. It's around regulating our qi, regulating our energy. And so for cancer, one of the issues can be is stagnated energy, stagnant qi, poor circulation, low levels of oxygen in the body. So the practices that can support the regulation, the movement of energy, that was what was drawing me. And again, the test pendulum, should I be doing this or doing more of sort of more yoga? And I could feel both in myself and when I would test like that, that this is what's helping me heal. And in that journey, that's been part of that harmonizing the mind and the body, seeing that they're not disconnected, they're completely interconnected. And so those Eastern practices, the deeper aspects of those that isn't really well known in the West is Neigong. It's not really being shared with many teachers outside of China, but that's around the inner cultivation of your inner universe and how you can then build energy, not just regulate it. So that's on my current pathway, is losing a kidney and where your energy is stored and the seat of your chi. So that's been a big journey for me over the last 15 months of starting to restore my energy and build those energy levels back up, and listening through that has been, really, really a powerful journey and a lesson, and something I obviously still do is then taking how can I take that deeper to then revitalize and bring more energy into my body to support the body's immune system, and obviously my ongoing healing from the trauma of being cut in the middle, right down the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a major trauma. Not only the diagnosis is a major thing to go through, and any treatment you would go through with cancer is a major ordeal, but definitely having an organ removed and then going through everything that you went through after as well. It's clear that you kind of shifted from surviving to really kind of rebuilding and finding what worked for you. I know on your website that you mentioned you struggled with your identity during your illness. So there's a lot of people who, and I'm one of them for sure, who tie their worth to their productivity or to their career. What did that loss of identity feel like day to day for you while you were going through this illness? And then also maybe, you know, before you quit your corporate career, was that kind of that same disconnect that you were experiencing?
Yeah, for sure. And that's the nature of the mind, and how over as we're born we start to then have thoughts, and some of them are sticky, some of them then create the conditioning, the belief systems. They coalesce and form together to create this sense of identity, the sense of James and who am I? And it takes ownership then for the thinking that's occurring in my mind, and the identification, then the attachment that comes with that to what we actually express or do in the world. That's the journey we all go through, that creation of an ego, that sense of self. And that sense of self then has identification to things in terms of how you see, or how I saw myself, and what made me valuable in the world, and what my purpose was at the time, and I've gone through my own deeper journey of seeing that my own evolution and shift from a very focused on me, what can I do for me, and how can I sell more to get more money and more things, into then a shifting into an us, my broader, my inner circle, my broader tribe, the people that share the same values as me. And then the highest and awakened state of that would be the we, seeing all of us. Everyone is the same. That me to us to we, that shifting. And that's part of the identity comes from that. So for me, there was, yeah, all I knew was selling and working in corporate, and then wanting to transition out of that, always work for another business, always an employee, to then transitioning into being my own boss, wanting to be a consultant, an entrepreneur, a coach. Um, and with that, there was also identification, and then who am I? Can I do this? What I spent 20 years of my life and being so successful, there were deep questions, deep doubts. Doubt,
Yeah.
though, I know that's something I've had such a deep relationship with, in terms of, doubting whether I would get through this cancer journey, in moments, through to doubting, can I do this? Am I set up to be an entrepreneur and to create something that we're going to run together to support others? Brings that deeper inquiry, contemplation into identity. And can I believe every thought? Seeing that the nature of thought is that no thought is absolutely true. Some thoughts are just truer than others. And seeing that there's a softening, there's not a reaction, there's a, a detaching from that identification, the thinking that's creating that feeling and that experience in the body, to getting curious. And in that space, there's room for a fresh thought, and an insight, which then sort of takes me into seeing doubt as just an old friend. It's like I'm wired to experience that thought form, but I don't have to get lost in it and identify with it. And then there's freedom. There's freedom with a quieter mind, freedom for an insight, to have an inspiration to then come in. There's a natural place of, instead of trying to do presence and become more present, we see that we are present when the thinking and the noise drops away. And that's part of the deeper intelligence of how the mind works, uh, is through that insight we then quieten, and then we can see a different perspective and see, actually, there's something here. There's this deeper consciousness, awareness, that has an awareness of the thinking and the James and the personality. But what I am is this deeper spaciousness, this deeper love, this deeper peace, that's then having this experience of James. And I don't agree with the people who say we need to get rid of the ego. That's part of our preferences, our sort of this flavor that we get to play in the world with, but not getting lost in it. And then, there's more space to play, and have more space for possibility, to meet other people with your full presence, and how that changes a relationship.
Yeah. When you were going through all of this, what was the hardest emotional part, or what was the part that I guess you feel like people don't talk about enough, or hadn't prepared you for in any way?
So fear is the, and how paralyzing the most powerful fears that we can have on us. And for me, I had my mum was ill with and becoming more lost in dementia. She was in Spain. And so there was this fear of one, I couldn't get back to her because of all of this that was happening with me in terms of that. So there was this fear of that in terms of what was going on in me emotionally around that. And then there was the fear of death, and how for a long time I thought that I had to sort of suppress and just stand up and just say, "Oh, I'm strong," rather than seeing that any emotion, instead of turning away from it, it's turning towards it and seeing, just as as I said earlier, rather than us thinking that our minds are a camera and we're just experiencing, and that fear is coming directly from the outside world, from the circumstance, from the cancer, seeing that it's actually coming through and being shaped by my thinking in the moment, um, can be sort of unconscious beliefs and deeper things that have been stored in the
Mm.
body. But in that recognition and seeing that, there can be a turning towards seeing that fear, that experience is just like the movie that's playing on the movie screen, but actually the deeper part of me is the screen. It's not colored or tarnished by what the experience, by the emotion. So there can be then, when we see that, and that's been my life's journey, to sort of turn in and turn towards and embrace. There's then a distilling, that sort of melting away when we open our hearts fully to yeah, in moments, it doesn't feel like that's possible. You get lost and caught up and get lost in the experience, in the fear, and then that's been my journey of exploring that, learning then to turn towards and embrace what I'm feeling, not taking my thinking as seriously as I used to, knowing that that fluctuates from, sometimes I can believe what my mind's saying, it's saying something, and other times it's not. I have a thought and it's not true. So therefore I don't hold it like I used to in that way. And that's also been part of that softening.
Yeah. You've also said that resilience isn't about denying the messy parts, but about embracing them. What does that look like in practice, especially when you're in the middle of something like a cancer
Well, it's, yeah.
diagnosis?
In the coaching that I now do, there's aspects about the fundamental parts is actually providing a deeper understanding of how the mind works. I call it an understanding of how living every moment we're living from the inside out. It's a
Hmm.
different paradigm. What we call like a paradigm. We can think back to where, you know, yesterday I was at the beach for sunrise, and you can see the sun that's rising above the ocean, and it looks like the sun is rising up and then the sun will set at the end of the day. And that used to be the paradigm. Whereas actually what we do now know is that the earth is rotating and the sun isn't moving. And so, but years ago we had that misunderstanding that
Yeah.
we thought this is how the universe works. Things move around the earth. And so there is a misunderstanding with us around how we believe the mind works. Most people still believe that it is like a camera and we're just experiencing that directly. But we can see now, neuroscience are also seeing this deeper truth, this different paradigm, that we create our reality from the inside out through the invisible power of thought. That's shaping our reality. And initially, when we hear that, we say, well, okay, we need to start controlling our thinking. We need to get into that. And there are obviously places within psychology in terms of going in that direction. For me, there's a deeper understanding of firstly seeing and recognizing, and the mind only works one way, and then knowing that there's a design for success. The more we see that truth of it only works one way, the more that the mind quietens on its own without us having to intervene, without us having to get involved and try and change our thinking. There's space for fresh insights to see a different perspective, where we're then see that the thought that we had, the experience, was a misunderstanding, and we come back into balance. So that's a key part of how I coach and work with people is for them to have their own insight, for them to have their own direct experience. That's the path of waking up. And then I then also play with all of the beautiful external practices, the outer pathways of things like the Eastern practices I've talked about, which then also help bring us that harmonization of the mind and the body. And then you come into, rather than life happening to you, it's life is happening for you, and life is happening through you. Yeah.
Have you ever read any Albert Einstein or studied Albert Einstein at all? A lot of some of what he talks about is very much related to reality and distortion and those kinds of things. Some of the things that you're saying are just like kicking that in my brain a little bit, and just one of those things. Like, I don't have anything specific to point you to, but just curious.
Yeah, yeah. These great thinkers, these, there's one of his inner circle, one of his students. I know more about David Bohm, a
Mm,
famous physicist. He worked with Oppenheimer, and one of my favorite quotes, which he shares, his sort of seeing, is that thought creates our reality and then says, "I didn't do it."
yeah,
And
that's
so
definitely it's
those neuroscientists and neuroscience, their neuroscience I'm deep into in terms of looking at how they can now see that actually what's the process that we create our reality, also aligned to this inside out paradigm, as I call it. And so, yeah, we can look at the deeper Eastern wisdom traditions, religions. They all point to that same, sort of deeper truth when we go to the deepest source of them.
yeah. I always find it fascinating when you look at something that was said so long ago or that started as a practice so long ago in another place, and it's just like, how did they know that? How did they figure that out? And now it's like, oh, these studies show that's not true, but then 20 years later a study will show that actually it is true if you look at it this way, kind of thing. And it's fascinating to me. All of that is always fascinating to me.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And we can look at when things are being invented. They'll come out,
Mhm.
and there's before there was internet and this ability for us to see what's happening everywhere in the world, there would be these people having identical insights and
Yeah.
thoughts of new inventions that are suddenly coming. You're like, well, how is that possible when they're completely disconnected and there's no way of communicating?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and so that's a deeper journey into seeing, well, actually, we have this belief that we're separate from the world, each other, but actually that's part of the deeper wisdom and teachings. Something I've been exploring deeper into is something called non-duality. So
Mm.
that the deeper meaning of that is that the nature of our being is peace and happiness, but we share that being, our essence, with everyone and everything. That's the
Ah,
essence of those deep teachings.
yeah.
Yeah.
Very Clan of the Cave Bear. I like that idea that we're all connected in some ways. And then I'm like, okay, but can I not be connected to these people and these people and these, like, there's that. Then you get into that little bit of it, and it yeah.
Yeah. Well, we can still have, even with that deeper understanding, that deeper truth, the deepest truth, that's when someone's fully enlightened, fully awakened.
Mhm.
That's what they see as that truth. But we still have, as I said, this ego, this personality, these preferences, these flavors and the flavors we like to be around. There's just a shift when we recognize that there is that at the deeper soul level, a deeper connection. We are the same as the person that we're connecting to, even though we might not agree what they're saying or their
Mhm.
behavior, but at that deepest level. And that can also shift relationships when we come into a relationship with that, knowing that there's something in me that's the same as what's in you. before we get into the content, before we get into the stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's something that you wish someone had told you or handed you during some of your hardest moments?
So I mean, I was so lucky to have so much support, such a loving community that around me in terms of while I was journeying, and there was so much love that was, yeah, I'm ever grateful for in terms of that loving attention and kindness and prayer, which was beautiful. For me, that, yeah, I was very lucky to be able to have a space like we are where I was able to spend time in nature. I remember a few years before going into hospital, I'd gone on a vision quest, a North American Apache Indian tradition where I spent 4 days and 4 nights alone in a 3 meter circle. No food. You just have water, no tent. You're just in that, yeah, an initiation. And in that journey, they talk about you having these detoxifications, the purging of the physical body, the mental, the emotional, and then this deep spiritual connection. And I remember coming onto my last day on that vision quest and looking up, and the largest eagle in Australia is called a wedge-tail eagle, and it was just flying and circling on top of me as I was sort of here. And I was, after 4 days with no food and no water, and not being able to, nothing to distract you. You didn't have a phone or things to write, and you couldn't do anything. You just had to be with you and your mind, and having this connection with this beautiful eagle, taking the eagle's perch, the eagle's view of the world. And then when I came years later and then came out of hospital, um, and my partner, she said, let me take to some nature. That's going to be good for you. And I was finding the energy in hospital really challenging. And as I said, very sensitive to other people's energies. And so she took me to this place where I could just sit on the grass. And as I was looking up, there was this wedge-tailed eagle that just dropped down close to me. And it was sort of then just reconnected, and I just, yeah, burst into tears. I felt that deeper connection to life, that we're actually one with nature. And that
Mm.
was the reminder, my partner sort of, yeah, offering and saying, this will help with the healing, coming back into nature, being with the trees, being with the intelligence that we can see in the world, rather than the doubt of the mind that life's coming to get me.
Great recognition on her part of like, this will help you. This will be good for you. I mean, I am of the opinion that I think everyone should get out into nature more, and myself included, because I'm in my house all the time. But I think everyone could use a little bit more of that connection to nature and animals and plants and all of those things. But yeah, I mean, especially if you've been in a hospital for a long time, or in a sterile environment or something like that. There are lots of studies that show, even looking at a picture of nature can really help your brain and really help your body kind of feel that connection back, and that it can do a lot of things that we don't fully understand, even just looking
Yes.
at a picture of nature. But if you can get out into it, I think that's even better. So good for her for recognizing that's something that you needed at that moment.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I'm very lucky to be with her.
Yeah. Oh, we have a great question that was sent in ahead of time. This person wanted to remain anonymous. They said, how can I rebuild my life with clarity and purpose while still being a caregiver for others when it feels like my needs always come last? And I love that question. I think it's fantastic because that could be a lot of different things, right? That could be you're a parent, like I've got kids, their needs always come before mine. You could be caring for someone with dementia. You could be caring for someone with cancer. There's all kinds of ways that this could apply. So how can someone rebuild their life with clarity and purpose if they're still just in the thick of it?
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful question, such a beautiful inquiry. So as I've been sharing already in our conversation, there's the inner path, so the inward path, which then is looking at that deeper question and sort of the pathways of meditation, and finding, there will be a particular type of meditation that will be the one for you. For me, it's I need to move. So I love conscious dance. I love the Taoist, that Qigong I was talking about. It's a movement which just that practice of moving to breath. So it's finding the ways which you'll naturally can be, as we've just been talking about. Is there moments where you can have some just time with your own self, your own energy, your own auric field in nature? And how can you guard those times to make sure, if you're in service to others and you're caring for someone else, it's so important to look at how can I make sure my own cup is filling
Mm.
rather than it's always depleting. And so there's different ways we can do that with the inner work, as I said, and that is one of the major pathways is meditation. As I've shared, the understanding I coach, and there's lots of different teachers and there's books as well that can point to this inside out understanding and this aligning to this new paradigm, this new way of seeing actually I'm creating my reality from the inside through the invisible power of thought. And once you have an insight around that to see that, that will create some space without more doing. What we don't, if we're really
Mm.
busy and we've got so much going on, we don't want to add more doing and something else to manage, like I'm managing the outside world and doing my best to care and look after and be the best caregiver I can. But then we don't want to also be having to then try and manage the mind on another job to do. And that's where these inward pathways, or the pathways of insight and realization, as I call them, create a shift without a doing. And then there is then those outer practices and pathways that we might explore. One of the favorite practices or exercises I'll share with people when I'm coaching is gratitude and appreciation. So starting the morning, and it's not trying to do it through the day and make it a doing, but just in the morning when you wake up first thing or wake up a little bit earlier, just be grateful and bring into it what you could be grateful for. 6 things, 3 which are routine, everyday things. Could be the sun is going to be out today, or it might be I'm going to feel the rain on my face. These little things are 3 routine and then 3 unique or semi-unique that you've got in your schedule that are going to be happening in the day. And you just bring as much gratitude and appreciation for those. And then at the end of the day, you just, before you go to sleep, you just think about 3 things, can do more, again, that have happened, which you can just be appreciative for and have gratitude for. Now, what this does is it rewires our brain, because unfortunately, part of being human, there's a bit of a negativity bias in our thinking as well. So we get more negative thoughts than positive. But I said, it's not about trying to manage this. It's just giving a little bit of support at the beginning and the end of the day. And if you continue and do that practice, you can spend a few seconds, a few minutes on each of those items, just dropping out of the head, dropping into the heart, bringing as much appreciation and gratitude. That will start to shift and open more possibility. It's like I call it a mood ladder or a quality of consciousness when we're in the bottom, when we're in fear and worry and overwhelm. And then we see no possibility. We see that this is happening to me. I'm having to do more than other people. And then in a higher quality of mind, we have this sense of possibility. We have the highest quality of gratitude and love. And it's not about bypassing, it's just about supporting our minds. So it will give us more energy for our own self-care, to also know where our boundaries are, to say, no, I need some space today. I need some time now just to regulate, to listen a bit more deeply to how my body, what it needs. And those are the starting points. Hope that helps.
I love the simplicity of a gratitude practice also, because it's not something that you don't even have to write it down. Like, these can just be internal thoughts for yourself. It really doesn't take anything for you to get this going, except for just the determination to do it and remembering to do it, which you can set alarms for and all of that kind of thing. There's apps for it, and there's all sorts of ways that you can support but it doesn't take anything extra, because I know when you're in one of these situations where you are a caregiver for someone else, it can feel like, I can't add another goddamn thing to my day. I can't do it. There's no time, there's no energy, there's no anything. But you truly do have to do something for yourself. Something that isn't about whoever you're caring for, something that isn't about whoever you're responsible for. You have to take something for yourself and really claim it. And gratitude is so simple to do. I'm not saying it's easy to do, but it is simple and it's free. And I think that that's fantastic.
Yeah, so true, and in that, it's an important point there because we can chastise ourselves for not doing it or forgetting to do it or just getting
Yeah.
so tired and smashed that we don't do it for that day. Is we can just commit to something and then we can recommit. We can
Hmm.
just start it again, and there's this shift we can go where we can have a thought about something. Okay, that's an idea. We can have an intention, and then we can step into a commitment about something, and then the highest point is we make a stand for it. That's just who we are. It's part of our being, and how we show up is one of gratitude in terms of with that. And it might feel, well, that how do I well, it's just taking a step, just making a commitment. And then if you need to, just to recommit and see what happens. I mean, that's the invitation is if you've never done this, experiment with this and do it for 45 days and see what happens to how you experience life and what starts to show up and what you might see differently.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. What does radical wholeness mean, and how do people start moving towards radical wholeness?
Yeah, great question. So there's you mentioned earlier Einstein. There's a beautiful man, Ken Wilber. They call him the Einstein of consciousness. And he actually wrote a book, Radical Wholeness. It's a quite a thick book. It's really a deep and powerful read, lots and lots of evidence, and talks to and points to some of the things I've also been sharing, but talk to in terms of four key areas if we want to be completely whole. One of those is waking up. So knowing the true nature of reality, knowing what we are in our essence. So that's one path and that's been we've seen through the traditions, through history, been a big focus on that waking up. There's also growing up, which is how we mature psychologically. It's like what I was sharing earlier, where we sit, we we grow and evolve out of it just being about me, egocentric. We see a lot of that in the world, don't we? These big leaders accumulating power, wanting more power in the me. There's then a shift into the us. It's called ethnocentric, where we've got similar values, but we see polarity. You see it all over the world. You know, yourselves in the US for the American listeners, the Republicans and the Democrats, and there's this is our truth, and we don't see the other truth. So and we have then friction and conflict coming from that at that stage of development that we're in terms of the collective, the world. So we can each have our own responsibility to grow up and shift out of me to us to we. And that maturing, that ripening is happening as we evolve. There's also then cleaning up, which is around sort of looking at how we can release and let go of some of the trauma, of the pain body, which can come out, which can get activated when something's happening, and suddenly you appear as someone different. There might be someone who gets really angry and flies off, and it's like, who are you? But it's this deeper part, this pain body, which can get turned on. And so there's a cleaning up, there's practices and work we can do is to release and again that embracing the loving what is, and in that loving and accepting there can be this dissolving, and then they're not going into reaction to that cleaning up part. And then there's the showing up. How are you showing up in the world and making the impact, bringing your genius, your zone of genius, and spending more time in your zone of genius to then light up the world, to be a lighthouse. And in your own illumination, in your own light, you'll light and that will help others shine. We're like tuning forks. So those four areas make up radical wholeness. So we can just focus on one, but actually to be truly whole, we need to move all of those and explore those. So that's yeah, why it's called a radical wholeness rather than just wholeness.
Is that something that you work with people on? Is that something that you're like, here's ways to improve each of those areas? Or is it one of the like, if as this area improves, this area is going to improve gradually as well? Or how does that work?
Yeah, so it is something I coach with that in
Hmm.
terms of, but then for people to then develop, evolve, to wake up in those areas, finding the practices, the ways, the inquiry, the contemplations that then support those actually shifting. And then as we do that, then our experience of life, our reality, that we spend more time being our best in our zone of genius, and then it's then we then get inspired, and then there's obviously deeper work around understanding what is your purpose, what is your genius that you're here. Each of us have a genius, what we can then bring and share, and step into our creativity, step into our flow, our joy, and so yeah, that's what lights me up in terms of when I'm working with people, and yeah, that's what my purpose is.
Yeah. If there's someone who's listening right now who feels like they are just falling apart, what's the one thing you want them to hear or to take away today?
Well, great question. And when we're in the moment of that, it doesn't have to say it's just your thinking. Of course it doesn't. What what helps in that space is to do your best in terms of your self-care, around that. If in what you've heard in this call there is a curiosity, because as I said, we'll have this fluctuation in our mood, this mood ladder. It's like weather. So sometimes we can just wake up or be in this real stormy, funky weather, which is like that. Well, if I'm like that, well, when that happens to me, and still happens sometimes, I won't go into having some deep and meaningful conversations or forcing a decision or trying to do something. I'll just notice that that's the weather that's here in the system, in the system, and knowing, and this is where an insight, as I talked about in terms of the deeper understanding of how the mind works, is that when we see it is fluctuating, we let go of trying to push it or suppress it or change it. It will soften, and then we find ourselves with a fresh thought that changes us into this higher up the ladder, a higher quality of mind where we see possibility again. And we'll all have moments and glimpses of that when we notice and see that I can see this thing, but I'm actually feeling differently about it. And that hasn't changed. It's something in us. And so that's the direction. But when we're in the midst of that, we sometimes we just have to be kind to ourselves. For me, I'll spend some time in nature, when I can. I will not then spend a lot of time with lots of different people with lots of energy and their moods, because moods are also contagious. If someone's, in some bad weather, that can also, like the energy of that, it's contagious. It can then catch us. We can get into reaction. So knowing that's actually, I'm not going to have this discussion now. I'm going to find my center, and that might need working with a coach to support you in terms of that. And the best coaches will see the best in you. They'll see your possibility. Even watching Ted Lasso, a beautiful
Huh.
series about a football coach, that lifts you up. You see Ted just sees the potential in others, and hanging out like that and seeing that helps, will shift out of that. So, we can be then looking at, well, what is our community like? What is the circle, in order to support us being at our best more often?
Ted Lasso is probably one of my favorite shows. I mean, it's so good. I started watching it after I had gotten a warning from my sister, like, be prepared to cry, even though it's soccer and you wouldn't think there's a lot of crying. She definitely gave me a warning. She was like, be prepared for this because you're gonna. And I went into it still unprepared even after that. And I was like, yeah, no, this is a fantastic show. It's so good. Highly, highly recommend it. But I'm so glad that you mentioned that it's one of those like, you're human. You have these days where it's not all super shiny, fun, happy times. Because I definitely have dark days and everyone does. Everyone has those moods. And the fact that you mentioned that like moods are contagious a little bit. My 12-year-old is going through some human emotions these days. And
Mm.
our day starts at 6 a.m. And so it's like if I wake up and he wakes up and he's in a teenager mood, that's going to impact me. And I have to consciously like tell myself, okay, he's off at school. You need to reset a little bit because that was about him. That's not about you. And let's figure out where you are in your day. But it can be that like, it's a really conscious thing that I have to do sometimes. And some days it's easier to do that reset. And some days it's not. Some days I'm just like, no, I'm really cranky because of someone else, because of someone else's mood. And then some days I'm just cranky because of my own self. But yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that as well. I think a lot of people, especially those who do all this service for other people and do all these things for their community, sometimes you can look at them from the outside. And of course, I say this all the time, but everyone only shares what they want everyone to see, right? And so you can look at someone like yourself and go, oh, he's got it all figured out. Like, there's not a day that goes by that he doesn't know what he's doing and he doesn't know why he's doing it, and he just is in like all these good moods and everything, and that's just not reality. Like, it's just not reality for anyone.
That's right. And for some of us, I mean, we can call them empaths. I'm very, very sensitive energetically. I don't know, some of your listeners might know human design and the gene keys. They're
Hmm.
another body of work, which I'm a gene keys guide, and that's an understanding of energy. It understands in terms of looks at shadows, gifts, and cities, the highest expression. So looks at a map of consciousness. It gives us an understanding of why we are like we are. So, but what I found with that, the gene keys and human design is it showed me that I'm very, very sensitive in that system. You have 9 energy centers in human design, and I have 7 which are open. So I can literally feel other people's emotions. And often I'll sort of pick up what my beloved is feeling before she's even aware of it, and it's amplified in me. Now, for a long time, I can get lost in that. And if I'm out of balance and not doing my own self care and just sort of listening, then I would just find that I'm feeling something and it's not even mine. And it's sort of so, so interesting. And so that's been really helpful as well, being conscious of that. And then for myself, I know that I need to have as part of my very nature is time on my own, bit of hermit time, bit of time in nature. And if I do that, then I can, I don't get lost in someone else's emotional
Hmm.
wave. Like it still it still happens. And then I'm like, oh, and then I sort of will fall into reaction. Then
Yeah.
I'm in that low quality mind, then I'm into reaction and accusation and victim. They're doing it to me. So it's that again, it's fascinating that how powerful the mind is. Like we've got a Hollywood movie production system inside our minds, and that's creating this experience. And it's so easy for all of us, me, and obviously there are some fully awakened people on the planet, but for most, it's an iterative. It's a process, a gradual process of then
Yeah.
that happening less, but there'll still be edges. There's another teacher, if one of my favorite non-dual teachers, Rupert Spira, British teacher, and he just has this pure presence of love whenever I've been with him, or even just listening to some of his YouTubes. Incredible, such a humble being. And what I loved as well is what you were saying as well, is that someone said to him, "Are you always just completely at peace, in love, and happy?" Says, "No, there's still some things that can catch me and react. And then that also made me feel, oh, yeah, so there's a humanness. There's a humanness to how, we experience and get lost and go into reaction.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, that's our journey. And life will bring us, that's the other thing I was going to say, is life will give us the relationships in order to look at the things that are creating these things for us to grow and to accept. And we think, why on earth have I fallen in love with this beautiful woman? And I'm getting lost in her emotional waves all the time. I'm like, oh, so that's part of the gift that she's bringing to me, is for me to be able to master energy, master my emotions by experiencing someone who has these massive emotional highs and lows. And so that's another thing just to contemplate, go, "Oh, okay, how is this person a gift?" And I can appreciate, rather than just go, I need to find a new person. And then we go into that outside in. I'll just find a better girlfriend, a
Mm.
boyfriend, job, a circumstance. So that's, yeah, just a funny musing I have. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Grim Reaper said Ted Lasso showed me loving life is possible. Yeah, like I said, that's one of my top shows, hands down. It's so good. Every episode is just so good. And
And it,
I wind up quoting it all the time.
well, and it's like we were saying earlier, it's one of the things you can watch over and over again
Yes.
and just see some deeper things around how the world and how people transform when we have that, uh, that way of being, of seeing the best in someone.
Yeah. For those who are here with us live, we are coming up on the last few questions, and you know that means that I'm going to remind you that if you have any questions for our guest tonight, feel free to pop them into the chat. We'll make sure to address them while we are here. And speaking of community questions, Bite Mark sent this question ahead of time. She would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
Yeah, so it's a very old one. It's also well known. It's She Walks in Beauty by George Gordon Byron. And yeah, I'd love to read that. I have it here. So
Please.
she walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. One shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace which waves in every raven tress, or softly lightens o'er her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling place. And so on that cheek and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days in goodness spent, a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent.
Beautiful. Yep, that's a very, very classic one. I love it. Is there something in particular that speaks to you about that poem?
Well, it talks to me to both outer beauty and inner beauty,
Hmm.
and how the beauty and the way we shine will also come when the light in us is shining.
Yeah. What is your favorite life hack?
So I have lots of wands which I play with, but one which is so powerful, which I love as a life hack, is eye gazing. And with someone that you've got a strong relationship with it, because eye gazing can be, or if someone's just staring at you, it can be disconcerting. It's like staring into the windows of someone's soul.
Mm.
Dinner with your beloved, your intimate partner, with a dear friend that you feel a deep connection with. You can eye gaze, and with your intimate partners, this is what I do with my beloved, is before we go to sleep, we just have 5 minutes. Sounds like a long time, but 5 minutes just eye gazing into each other's eyes, looking into their left eye. It's something that happens from neuroscience as it starts to synchronize the right hemispheres of our brain, and it deepens our connection, deepens the love, it sort of shifts our levels in terms of the body, our oxytocin changes. But we find that there's just a deeper connection just from eye gazing. And then we can do that with our beloved. We can also just, when we're talking to someone, make eye contact when you're speaking and keep that eye contact. Really powerful to do it with your partners too, is to make that agreement. We're going to talk and we're going to look at each other in our eyes. Again, invitation is try that, experiment with it and see what happens. And that's a lovely life hack to deepen bonding, connection, love in your relationships that you have around you.
Right, that's fantastic. I've never tried that. I'll have to read up on it for sure. Is there a reason to choose the left eye, or is it just like a choice to pick an eye? Like like the pick an eye, babe.
Yes, because the way way the eyes work with the left eye, it's the right hemisphere of the brain that's
Oh, I
being
see.
activated.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why. But you can also do, left eye for more. Yeah, so it's if you're wanting, but for emotional connection and bonding, you would do the left eye for the right hemisphere.
Interesting. Okay, I will have to look into that for sure. That's a new one to me. It's not often that a life hack is new. Most of the time it's like, no, I've heard of that. That's great. That's fantastic. I'm glad that works for you. But this one is new, so I'll have to look into it for sure. Well, it is time for the magic moment of the stream, and I have a magic wand here. If you could wave, and Tyrion's interested, if you could wave a magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception surrounding mental health, what would it be?
So it would be that misunderstanding that we experience life from the outside in, or we
Mm,
experience life as a camera. We would all recognize and realize that life is being created from the inside out through that invisible power of thought, and that there's this deeper intelligence, a design for success, that when we recognize and see that, we'll have more freedom, more flow, and we'll see more possibility to do more of what we want to in the world.
yeah, I love that. And you've talked about that a lot tonight. So that makes perfect sense for that to be your magic moment. Well, I am going to host your socials one more time so that folks who weren't here at the beginning can go in and connect with you. While I'm doing that, I'm just going to give you the floor and open it up to anything additional you want to talk about, or anything you didn't get a chance to talk about, and hand you the mic for a little while.
Yeah, well, thank you. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I'd love to hear from any of you that if you're curious to ask any other questions as well, directly with me. So you can see on our website, oasis-within.com.au, get access to what we're creating here and also what we're doing online. And yeah, hopefully, that's my wish, my offer of some inspiration, that it makes you curious to then explore some of the things I've touched on. I've talked a lot about different things, both the inward path and the outward facing path, and how finding the ones for you which align to you. So if you've tried meditation and it's like that just doesn't do it for me, it's that curiosity to see, well, what's the style, what's the one for me that will support me in terms of finding the peace that you are. And that's being playful, experimenting. That would be the other thing, is that, I found didn't really talk about, but I found a lot of my life I was a very serious seeker. Life was very serious in terms of wanting to get somewhere and do this. And so there's a shift there in terms of how to bring more playfulness, how to bring more fun into our lives, and how can we guard that and do that. And the same as that gratitude and appreciation practice, then in itself will start to then create a higher quality of mind and more possibility.
I love the idea of play and being playful as an adult. I think it's something that a lot of folks miss. A lot of folks miss out on. But anytime you can be silly, I support it. 100%. Well, James, thank you so much for joining us today. And folks who are here with us today, really appreciate y'all joining in. Tyrion is very excited for everything right now. He's he's in it. But thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate it. 488 says thank you so much for sharing. And I'll just echo that. Thank you, James, for bringing this conversation to fruition today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, really lovely to talk to you. And yeah, it's been really lovely to to explore all of these different things together. So thank you.
Yeah. All right, folks, give me just a second to disconnect with James. I will be right back. Stick around. And that is a wrap on my conversation with James Brett. If you made it this far, thank you. That was a lot to sit with, and I hope something in there landed for you. I want to reflect on a few things that stuck with me from that conversation, because I think there's some stuff worth carrying with you into the rest of your week. The first thing is the idea that we aren't just passively receiving our experience of life like a camera pointed at the world. We're actually creating it through the way we think. How many times have you been in a situation that was objectively fine, and your brain just absolutely convinced you it was a disaster? Or you were dreading something for weeks, and then it turned out to be okay. The outside world didn't change, your thinking did. Your thinking drove that. The second thing was what he said about moods being contagious. I felt really called out by that part of the conversation because, yes, I have absolutely absorbed someone else's bad morning and carried it around with me all day like it was mine to begin with. Knowing that that's happening, being conscious enough to catch it and go, wait, hold on, that isn't actually mine, I need to reset. That's a skill, and it takes practice, but it's worth building that skill up. The third thing is the idea that resilience doesn't mean pretending the hard parts aren't hard. James went through something genuinely terrifying. He was scared. He had days where the fear was paralyzing. He didn't spiritually bypass his way through cancer. He turned towards it, he felt through it, and that's what helped him move through it. Not suppressing it, not performing strength he didn't have, just being honest about where he was. I think a lot of us have been sold a version of resilience that's basically just suffering quietly and looking fine on the outside. And that version is exhausting and it doesn't work. Turning towards the hard stuff, being honest about it, asking for help, that's really the whole point. And if you are someone who's rebuilding right now, whether that's after an illness, a loss, a career falling apart, a relationship ending, whatever it is, I just want to say the clarity James talks about doesn't usually arrive all at once. It builds, and it can build painfully slowly through small, honest moments and small, honest choices. You don't have to have it all figured out today. You just have to be willing to keep going. Now, if you got something out of today's episode, I would love it if you took 30 seconds to leave me a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening right now. I know everyone says that, and I know I say it every week, and it can feel like it's such a small thing, but it genuinely makes a difference in helping other people find this show. Shows with more comments, shows with more likes, get more eyes. If you're on YouTube, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming out next. And if you know someone who's in the middle of rebuilding right now, send a link to this episode to them. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do for someone is just say, hey, I heard this, and it made me think of you. And thank you for being real, for being part of this community. This show exists because you keep showing up. Until next time, know that it's okay if things feel heavy, confusing, or downright overwhelming. You don't have to fake being fine. Even tacos fall apart, and they are still good exactly as they are. See you next time.